loves. Thursday, February 20th, coming to you from the shop just a little bit before 1 p.m. Thursday, we're trying now. It's been suggested, we've been asked if Thursdays we could do a topic. Last week, if you go look at episode, I think it's 38. No, it's not a full 7, maybe 39. Hey, Joe, we discussed the rise of the graphic novel, memoir, nonfiction, biography, and this week I was asked if we could do another topic. It's very shareable, I was told. We're never becoming a viral sensation. I don't even think we're becoming a few thousand followers kind of thing through our lives. Maybe if Joey, again, Joey has a lot of stuff going on, but if Joey gets back on track and editing videos, or if I end up somehow with time to edit more deep dives, that could be of interest. But for now, we'll try to do them here on the live stream topics, the sort of thing that I was working on making whole videos of and things like that. I chose right now because today's a weird day. We've got a snowstorm coming, even though like every single some guy was taking pictures outside in a jacket. It's a cop, I get a traffic guy taking pictures of someone who's parked illegally. I don't know. Anyway, every single like news organization ever has by this point been like, yeah, there's going to be flurries, like a light dusting, but still says on all the weather apps up to a couple inches. It's not seem to be happening, but it's cold. It's been cold the whole week. It's cold. We already did have some people in, so it's possible to pick up. The parking lot is insane. It's filled with people. There's people circling. We had Lave here. I had Lave. Sarah had to do some shopping. I came, right before opening with Lave. He hung out and he just left. But I was like, you know what? If it gets busier, it's going to get busier later, and I don't want to miss the live stream. And I do like this idea of us doing a topic on Thursday, so let's do this topic. That's my whole introduction. I thought I'd give you a second to check out the whole superhero section as it currently looks. It's not the whole thing, obviously. Wow, it's just so interesting. I guess they have to take pictures of the cars that they're ticketing nowadays. Like if the person argues I didn't do it. But anyway, the reason I picked this side and this area where I just put this poster to block all the mess inside there. The reason I chose that is because when we talk about superhero continuity, comic book continuity, and now I'm going to move that. I've set that up to a more comfortable spot. I hate sort of not being able to see the door at the shop. So. Okay, when we talk about superhero continuity, when we talk about comic book continuity, one of the major things to discuss, to keep in mind, is the bombshell success Marvel had with Marvel's Secret Wars. So to quickly, briefly explain continuity, we have to get into a very short, very basic history of the superhero comic book. The first superhero comic book is arguably, pretty much, definitely, mostly described as Action Comics #1, with Superman who has superhuman powers. Now, there are other characters who exist and other things with other powers, whatever. DC, at the time called National Comics, and Timely and Atlas go on to create a bevy, along with Fawcett and many other publishers, a bevy of characters, zillions of characters just explode between 1938 and 1945, really the war. Maybe we could give a few characters hit into 47, 48, but before 1950, the superhero explosion is over. The superhero explosion is done, and a lot of the companies that were making these comics don't even exist anymore. They may still be making comics, but the actual publishing house that they were happening through has dissolved, fallen apart. Millions of things happened. A bunch of characters who we think of as DC characters were originally in the early 40s published in a different company completely, sometimes under the Fawcett line, but they were owned by National. It's a whole crazy thing. But the superhero is basically set in stone by the late 40s, early 50s. And the superhero story is moralistic action adventure tales for children. Like that's the premise. It's going to be simple. It's going to be fun. Now, I'm not saying that as a negative. To say that superhero comics in the 40s were made for children is like saying that the current She-Ra on Netflix was made for children. Yes, children were the audience that we are working on, but we're not making this in a way that is disposable and garbage and bad. A lot of the 40s superhero stories are for the time, especially when you compare them to the stuff coming out in newspaper strips or in even more disposable media, a level above. The puzzles, the mysteries were a little bit more intense. Superman's morality and the things he stood up for were a lot more on his sleeve. But the main thing was even when they had like the Justice Society, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Our Man, Sandman, even when they were all in it, there was no continuity. These things happened. They happened. Stuff just happened. Superman had a lion's head one issue, and the next issue he doesn't. Batman gets a kid, and they do 5 issues of stories of the same. Like, that's just, maybe. Doesn't exist. The Human Torch and Namor fight in Marvel Comics #1. They famously discuss the fact that they hate each other when they team up, like every time they team up, or when they fight, but they don't directly say, oh, well, this happened, then this happened. They're all just stories because that was what they were for. The idea was that you were picking these things up for a dime. Basically, you could get a sandwich and soup for a dime, 1940. So you're picking up this thing to entertain you for a while. And the simplicity of the writing, and in some cases the simplicity of the art, meant that for it to be worth that 10 as well, you were probably pretty young, or you were very into the art. Now, I'm not going to go and discuss what was happening in non-superhero comics in the 40s and 50s, because that's a whole other story and much more interesting in my opinion. Superheroes get stale very quickly. By the late 50s, they're not selling exceptionally well. This was actually covered last week when we talked about biography comics. When Stan Lee gets the go-ahead to write basically whatever he wants over at, Timely, with the Fantastic Four, he's just trying to make a superhero comic that's, as good as a superhero comic can be. That's all he wants. So he goes to Kirby and he goes, I want challenges of the unknown with superpowers. I want the family dynamic, the science fiction adventure, which everyone loves nowadays. Challenge of the Unknown is a completely non-superhero comic that Kirby and Simon made. Just exploring scientific adventures. But I want it superhero. They have powers, fight people with powers, and you get the Fantastic Four fighting giant monsters. 1961, okay, from the underground against an evil mole man and his moloids, while you get a whole science fiction origin of them being space exploration. 1961, hot. It comes out fine. It's very successful. You get the whole Marvel boom there. But one of the things that Lee decides is going to be a major marketing point of the Marvel Universe, like the Silver Surfer, like the Human Torch and Namor fighting and mentioning their previous fights, there's going to be continuity. The Avengers happen, okay, 10 issues into the Avengers, they're going to meet the Fantastic Four. The Hulk is going to fight the Fantastic Four. Spider-Man is going to try and join the FF. Everyone is going to meet everyone else, and in their comics, they're going to reference it. The Fantastic Four are going to be like, oh, who's at our door? Is someone else trying to join our team like Spider-Man? It's a value-added idea. Every comic that happened in this universe happened. Marvel does that, but they're comics. Like, it doesn't matter. They're still disposable entertainment for children. Lee, I would say by unfettering Jack Kirby, by allowing people like Don Heck and Wally Wood much more creative freedom than they had in the newspaper work that they were doing, creates a new pop art form in the Marvel comic book. The Marvel comic book becomes this extra over-the-top thing, and a big part of it is that they're all weaved together, much like the cinematic universe recently gained popularity. It's not the added benefit. It's not the thing that people care about, but it's cute. It's fun. When I go, who would win in a fight? The Hulk or the Thing? You go, well, which of the 5 times that they met? Because it happened. So it's nice. It's fine. DC realizes they're kind of missing this, and from around 1970 and on, try to use the idea of continuity a little bit more in their comics. Try to have their characters cross over. They reference they Justice League in the 50s. The Justice League met the JSA. But now the late 70s are coming in. Everyone sees the writing on the wall that things are shifting. DC goes much more heavily into it, and they start discussing the history of World War. There was no Superman, Batman, or Wonder Woman way back. First, there was Our Man. Wait, but didn't you tell us that was a different reality where they met the Justice League? Haven't you done about? Yeah, but it just doesn't. They have a lot of problems with it, which leads us back to Marvel Superhero Secret Wars. Marvel Superhero Secret Wars comes out, I believe, 84. Starts 83, I think, comes out 84. A line of toys comes out for 85, which do very well, not because of Secret. Every kid is buying going, what's Secret Wars? They saw it on the shelf, but they didn't really know what it was. But Secret Wars, 12-issue event, happened for, I think, 3 months. I think it was every 2 weeks. Maybe I'm wrong. Every week, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was over like 6 months. Maybe it was every 2 weeks. Maybe 7. Like, it didn't work out perfectly. I don't think it was a full year. And it affected the other Marvel comics. Marvel comics would have a storyline. The storyline would end, and it would come back and be like, well, now that our heroes are gone in the Secret War, or, where's so-and-so? See the Secret War to find out where they disappeared to. It affected everything. So not only are the Marvel characters crossing over, mentioning each other, referencing each other, and everything that ever happened, but they're doing things, big things, that will affect everyone. This was a big deal. Secret Wars became sought after as it was ending. It's only around here that people started to care about Secret Wars. Because more and more people were hearing about it. More and more people were asking about it. I might as well grab it. I should read it. I should try it out. And it became a big, big thing in the superhero community. But it really did not start with a huge bang. You can read the comic press for it leading up to it, and they're kind of like, why should we care? What is this? Again, Marvel, DC, it's very difficult. We should always have a running commentary of what's happening within the world of comics beyond them, because in 1984, they are running scared. Their magazines have been selling amazing for them in the 70s, but when they try to move that more adult stuff into the comics, it just doesn't work. DC has slowly started slotting in these much more thoughtful, much more interesting and meaningful takes on their characters. This Alan Moore guy's done some Green Lantern. He's done some Justice League that's really, and a few other people. Paul Levitz, of course, with Legion of Superheroes. Stuff's getting more mature, more thoughtful. Marvel goes and says, everything's happening at once. Everything is like, it's there. This is the real world for the Marvel Universe. And DC goes, wait. That's it. We've got it. So, again, this is not at all how any of this happened, but for the sake of what we're talking about here, which is really our lead-up history lesson for the main thing that we're going to talk about moving forward. So, crazy. This is why I prefer to have these videos edited. Marvel Secret Wars directly leads to something that DC already knew they had to do. Denny O'Neil had been telling them for ages that they needed to up the content of the story. They needed to make them more mature, but they still read like after-school specials, okay? So even as things get more mature and thoughtful over at DC, these are some exceptional stories that DC was doing in the late 70s, early 80s. They're still for children, especially at Marvel and DC. There are some other superheroes that are a little bit more mature then. There's this science fiction stuff and fantasy stuff that's much more mature. But it's still something simplified. DC decides to solve all of that in one fell swoop. Crisis on Infinite Earths. Crisis on Infinite Earths introduces a concept similar to what Marvel did. The world is ending. This world is ending, like all the other multiverses have ended. The multiverses are being eaten. Save the multiverse. See all the multiverse. Now, they didn't just do this. This didn't just happen. DC spent a year, weaving in characters and stories and setting up ideas that would allow them to remind you that there's a multiverse, to set certain characters into place, to let them change, become new characters, start up new things. A lot of things were done in this, but the big thing that it did was, one, it made it very clear that the DC comics that you read are just like the Marvel. It's all happening at once. As Crisis, Marv Wolfman was like, oh, you like the idea this is all happening at once? There are characters who dip out of an issue of Crisis, have an entire adventure in their own comic, and then show up 2 issues later with a new thing, with a new weapon or whatever, because of the events that happen in their book that you have to then go and read to even understand. Crisis is the first great crossover. It is a crossover where not only the main book has a story that affects other things, but things that happen in the other books affect the main book. But much more than that, it locks into place DC continuity, and it creates a very, very settled legacy for characters. There's World War II characters. There's Superman, Batman era. There's their teen sidekicks. And there are the current run of young heroes. 1986, 1987, DC puts out a plethora of new books post-Crisis. They got you a new Justice League. They get you the deluxe format, which they had used in 1 or 2 other comics across the board for more adult comics, some of which don't even have the comic code on them and deal with much more mature things like Wolfman and Perez, Teen Titans, the new Teen Titans, which is, again, starts as mature for kids, superhero books, thoughtful, and elevates itself by the end of its run. I was explaining to someone who's a Titans fan but's never gone back to the original stuff, the Raven, Dick Grayson stuff, and how insane and psychological it was. And it was a big deal. Meanwhile, they let a bunch of special projects go through, and Dark Knight Returns comes out, and Watchmen comes out, and the idea of maturity in comics is like, yes, we need our superheroes to have all these flaws. Okay, but while we're doing that, we also need to have the regular superhero comics that kids buy. Kids buy superhero comics. Kids enjoy superhero comics. So those are still happening. They're just ticking away. Dan Jurgens is writing Superman. He's writing, I think, 2 of the 4 Superman titles. Superman's coming out every week in 1989. And it's a little bit more mature. It's a little bit more thoughtful. But as someone who read them at 7 or 8 years old, they were also readable at 7 or 8 years old. They were still simplistic enough. John Byrne made Superman really, he grounded it and he made it thoughtful. And it's for the older reader. Sure. But I will tell you, I read Superman number 3. I talk about this all the time. The Superman blurring his face, Lex Luthor figuring out Clark Kent is Superman issue as a kid at 8 or 9 years old, and was like, this is so cool. It was geared, filtered for that audience, okay? People always talk about what a pervert John Byrne is and all these sexy women in his books, and it's like, yeah, they knew that. That's part of what was for the older audience. It's like a shonen, manga that has a couple of, what do they call them? They call them, I don't call them what they used to call them, which I won't say in case we get ranted, but, explicit angles for people who enjoy that kind of thing to enjoy. Superman is not Watchmen. It's not Swamp Thing, the about to be launched Vertigo line, Sandman. It's not that. It's still this ongoing stuff. So continuity, the idea that everything that ever happened to Superman, except all the Golden Age adventures, right? Everything that's before, in Crisis, this world started, sure. But well, so John Byrne locked that into place, Superman. Clark Kent grew up in the late 60s, in Smallville, blah blah blah, and he really lays it out and gives you a timeline without ever saying the exact time. But 5 years of comic stories, 5 years of weekly Superman comics, and suddenly things don't make sense, because 5 years of weekly Superman comics usually, especially then, amount to like 2 or 3 months of Superman's life. again, I'm using Superman specifically for a very, very important reason. Because of his weekly comics, they call it the Triangle Era, the Superman comics all connected to each other. So you would be a month between Action Comics, but you flow from one to the other, maybe 2 days passed in that month since you read it for Superman. Right? So continuity, it's not going to line up anymore. Clark Kent can't celebrate his 40th birthday 5 years from when it would be based on when so this stuff starts falling apart very quickly, but it doesn't matter. Because this isn't Watchmen. This isn't important. Just play it until you run into 0 Hour. 0 Hour, people love summer events. They've already done multiple summer events over at DC. So we do a little time, and there we go. We've got new Jan Jurgens done Origin of Superman. And you know, we're not just doing this for Superman. Everyone else, now again, same thing happens to everyone else post-crisis, except without a weekly book, it becomes even weirder. Batman has more than 4 books at this point. So he's having so many adventures they couldn't possibly fit. Other characters have a month in which, like, nothing happens between issues. For 5 or 6 years at this point, I think 0 Hour is 94. So we're talking 8 years at this point of a few moments passing, and it's 8 years for me. What's this person's age? How does 0 Hour we just move things up. Superman grew up in the 70s. Move it up, fine. And they do this for a while, and you know what? It's not that bad. It's really not that bad. The late 90s hit, and the audience has shrunk down to people who read comics, people who have read comics, and a few new people getting into other things. It's around now that Dwayne McDuffie, I think he writes the first version of it. It's not what would eventually be the big final version, because I think that didn't go up till early 2001, but I could be wrong. I don't remember. But he writes an essay about continuity, about this idea that everything happened, that everything needs to happen, is bad for comics. It's not good for comics. I will not get into everything Dwayne says, except to say I agree with him completely. But he uses an amazing example of television shows, citing ones at the time on NBC. At that point, NBC, that's why I believe it was late 90s, would do tie-in events, right? Famously, there was a blackout across must-see TV. And Friends had a blackout, and Mad About You had a blackout, and Seinfeld, they did a little clip bit at the end because they didn't want to be part of it, where they're like, was that a blackout? Oh, I don't know. I think it was the only time they were part of an event at all. And he talked about how you take those things and then you micro connect every little cute crossover, because the show's creator was the show creator of something else and they have someone, and he gets into the Newharts and how Bob Newhart and Bob and Newhart and all this stuff, and then he leads to this amazing conclusion where they all are in one universe, basically. And that universe is fake. That's like his final conclusion because of a different show. And it's amazing. And it's very much the point. But, does it really matter? It really shouldn't matter that much. And he's going on how it's become an issue. And then I believe in the later version, which is the early 2000s, he said it's what basically destroyed the new audience getting into comics. And by the early 2000s, that is true. By the early 2000s, comic sales are shredded, not just because of the rise of the internet, though that's a huge thing that people weren't considering at the time, but much more so by the fact that this stuff was incomprehensible to read. If you picked up Spider-Man and he met Dr. Octopus in 1999, the amount of exposition and information they would give about each other's past and this and that. He goes, how about the time you almost married my Aunt May, and the time you were dead and a lady replaced you, and the time that you had that really hot girlfriend, and the time that you had that. It was absurd. Oh, got some customers. I hope so. We'll see. Welcome. Help you all find anything? All right. So we are in the middle of a giant rearrange. Things are all over the place. So mostly the kids section settled, but there's also loads of stuff that's kid appropriate. Plenty of other stuff. Yeah, no problem. Any questions? Don't hesitate. All right. What were we up to? Early 2000s, yes. So by the late 90s, people are not reading comics because it's just too much to get into. Oh, I have to know all this stuff. Oh, I have to know all this stuff. Oh, I have to know all this stuff. Made worse is the people who take an intense pride in knowing all this stuff, spreading on the early days of the internet the idea that you had to know all this stuff. If you said, well, I don't understand, Spider-Man doesn't make his webbing himself, like, you don't know about web shooters? And then someone else would go, well, in this one story, well, this, and it would become like a whole, what do they call it? Pissing contest, right? Hey, oh, you can keep going. There's plenty more to see. There's 2 more rooms. I just doing a little video, which we do every day. Marvel. What was first? I guess Marvel Knights was first. Yeah. By '96, Marvel realized they needed to do something for that adult audience that they built outside of their regular comics. They wanted to keep their comic code. But they realized people really prefer. So they made Marvel Knights. Marvel Knights were mature. They were thoughtful, and it's pretty successful for a while. Christopher Priest's Black Panther is so successful that when the Knights run line is ended, like everything else, it's folded in. But Priest keeps writing Black Panther. Everyone else gets like a new #1 and a new writer. Priest just keeps writing, and they see there's this big audience, but by 96, 97, that's the only audience left. No one new is getting in. Because even those mature books, that was their whole premise in them being mature, that everything ever happened. So, thus begins, which is really the beginning of the end, the Ultimate Universe. The Ultimate Universe is Marvel restarting, while giving the existing fans what they still want. You still want all this stuff. So now Marvel's going to completely, mess that up by changing continuity within their story. But at this point, sorry, was there anything I can help you guys with? Any questions? All right. At this point, Ultimate is the new universe, the easy thing to read. But as we just went backwards, you're all set with that, or are you still looking?
I think we're still
All right, I apologize. I just recently moved the desk, and it's kind of hard to like make sure when people want what. As always happens, they're reactionary, and DC decides that they need to really get in on this game. They need to do something sexy and different. And they look to the person who is currently riding high on the one thing that they still pride themselves on heavily, their continuity. So, let's review. DC locks in continuity in 1986. 10 years later, 1996, they're already having trouble having to do little retcons to reset it. 2002, they are looking to get new readers, looking to get people excited, and they're going to throw away all this continuity. They spent 20 years building how this continuity works. So what are they going to do? So they look to the man who has been very successful with continuity, Jeff Johns, and say, what can we do that's new, like the Ultimate Universe, but continuity? Again, this is not how these things happened. I'm very simplifying a million things. Hey, Neil. What's up?
Did I miss some of the TVA?
No, it's just the February is a weird month.
Oh, okay.
I think I think it's
I suddenly realized, I have a copy.
You got 2, right? So
yeah.
3, I think, is the end of the month, is next week.
I like your sweater.
And then, thank you. And then I just put in orders for 4.
Okay.
So like it's not till the end of March. So I think it's next week.
I missed a message.
No, I'll let you know when it's here. But yeah, it's
I like how this looks.
Oh yeah, no, we're doing right now. I'm in the middle of talking to a guy trying to about signs. Once the signs are here, it'll be. Yeah. Yeah. Well, the kids in the front made a lot of sense when I started. Because when I started, there was a lot more room back there and a lot less kid stuff, so I was able to have chairs and stuff like that, which up front is too much. Yeah.
Now next door.
I don't actually know the details.
Yeah.
But they're going to sell random stuff. So like.
That's it. Yeah.
Right. So like Pokemon wise, so they have Pokemon in their window. I saw just because the guy who's doing John was complaining about them. They have exactly what Cow Over the Moon has. Random old tins of You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know what else.
Okay.
Oh, I saw Hello Kitty bug. Like, but he's got Spider-Man in the window, and like I don't know, I have no idea. And look, I'll be honest.
You usually know everything, so.
Well, I
you don't
know.
you
I
don't
know more than
it's-
anyone else.
Right.
That I know what the Pokemon are. That's all. But I'll tell you this: if it's successful and has, it'll only help the rest of us because it'll become a collector niche place.
Right.
And if it's not, it won't work. Like, 'cause it's exactly that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What I saw in those boxes,
As long as it's-
either they'll have to be amazing,
Right.
which would be great for us.
Right.
This is a place to go to get super rare
Right.
game stuff, and then they'll come into house also. Or it's gonna be like, oh, I can get this anyway. So we'll see. It's one or the other.
Yeah. All right.
All right.
I'll see you later.
I'll see you. Sorry about that. Always gotta talk to Neil, help Neil out. He was looking for the comic his son collects. Jeff Jones, yes, one of my favorite punching bags. No, but you get, of course, the Green Lantern. Well, all the colored lanterns, the whole chromo lantern thing, as an attempt to draw more people in. This begins the downfall, 100% without any kind of doubt, of DC continuity. Because what you've done now is you've manhunted. It's a real deep cut for those of you. Manhunters were an event that DC did in the early 80s where they secretly revealed that a bunch of people that you've read in these comics were actually agents of the Manhunters. Who are the Manhunters? Oh, well, if you've been reading Green Lantern, you know that the Manhunters were the robots that the Guardians made before they made the Green Lanterns. But they were too binary, robotic, and therefore didn't judge fairly. Again, it's crazy, but they added this whole retcon, this whole big thing to create a mystery. It's not even early 80s, it's mid 80s, right? Because Lana Lang and Man of Steel is one of them. Yeah, so it's got to be mid to late 80s. But they do this whole thing to retcon that there's this whole secret thing that's been going on for years. With the Chroma Lanterns, they introduced an entire new piece of history to DC. Again, this is nothing new in the post-continuity era to make things fit. But this is a big one. It's a lot. Johns had already, of course, destroyed a lot of previous continuity in his JSA run, contradicting loads of things written by other writers that had come before him. And he continues to go do that through the Green Lantern series without, just as in JSA, wrapping them up or making them cohesively make sense as to why they are different than what we think. And the holes in DC continuity, which of course there are always going to be, because it's an absurd idea to have, really start to show. Directly leads to the New 52. Reboot, new reality, which directly leads to the Doomsday Machine undoing of the reboot, etc., etc. It has reached a point now where in DC Comics, they don't know what has happened in all of their reality. They like avoid talking about it for a huge amount of stuff. And that is the problem with continuity, and that is how continuity led to people reading a lot less single-issue comics, and specifically why DC has suffered with it and struggled with it so long in the 2010s with the New 52 and etc. And like I said, so I prefer to do these as sit-down videos that can be edited because the store is open. So I will wrap it up there until next time, tomorrow? Well, tomorrow's Friday, so we'll see. Maybe tomorrow. Remember, damn it, babies, you gotta be kind.